You think the sea is a place of freedom, of wind, sunshine, and endless summer days. Think again, because amidst those vast waves, there are screams no one hears. There are boats with no one steering. And there are eyes, not human, watching you from within the dense mist. In today's video, you'll hear 3 completely true stories told by people who still haven't found peace after those drifting nights. A group of friends responds to a cry for help in the bay, only to realize something was waiting for them all along. 2 brothers discover a ghost ship in the middle of the ocean, where someone had died, but seemingly not alone. And 2 sisters living by a private canal are faced with a stalker, one who didn't just follow them home, but may have never left. No gore, no ghosts, just the sea, the night, and things no one can explain. If you've ever boarded a boat, ever felt something was off in the middle of the water, watch this video until the end, because the scariest thing isn't what you can see, it's what's coming closer, without you even knowing. The bay was still as a mirror, reflecting the warped July moonlight on gentle waves. Kyle's 27-foot boat drifted lazily in the heart of the night, like a small island carrying music, laughter, and the innocence of youth. Kyle, the guy who always stayed sober amidst drunken nights, was the soul of summer. He didn't drink, didn't smoke. He just loved steering the boat, as if the ocean were the biggest toy he'd ever been allowed to touch. There were 5 other friends on board, including Jason, the only one who couldn't stop staring at the lighthouse on the windbreak island. That lighthouse hadn't been operational for years, yet that night it was lit. A flickering light, like a faint breath struggling to rise against the night. Jason squinted. He couldn't look away. It wasn't the light itself, but a chill creeping down his spine. There was something about the rhythm of that beacon, steady, but somehow wrong, as if someone was signaling. "Kyle, turn off the music," Jason said. No one heard him. He had to repeat it 3 times. Finally, the music stopped, leaving an eerie void in the night. Everyone held their breath. Then, it came. A scream, high-pitched, tearing through the air like claws. A woman's voice, desperate, echoing from a small nearby island, not from the mainland, not from the windbreak island, but from that nameless, silent shadow floating between the 2. Jason shot to his feet. "Someone needs help. Did you hear that?" They froze, hearts pounding. A second later, the scream rang out again, clearer this time, trembling, "Please, help me." The look of panic spread among them. No phones, no signal, just the boat, the water, and a voice calling into the night, like the darkness itself had borrowed a human voice to lure them into a place no one should ever go. And then, as if on instinct, Kyle started the engine. The boat sliced through the water, heading straight into the dark. The engine roared, shattering the silence. Kyle gripped the wheel tightly, eyes locked on the island ahead. Now, nothing more than a faint shadow. No one spoke. The only sounds were the waves being split apart and the wind rushing past the boat's sides like hurried whispers. Jason stood at the bow, the flashlight on his phone trembling in his hand. He scanned across the water, over the dense trees spilling down to the edge of the shore, but saw nothing beyond the pitch-black night. "We're close," Kyle said, voice hoarse. He dropped anchor when the boat was just a few meters from the shore, and the water here was only knee-deep. All 6 of them got off the boat. They waded through the cold mud, pants soaked at the cuffs. Jason led the way, followed closely by Kyle, then the others spread out behind, flashlights flickering. "Miss!" Jason shouted. "We're here to help." No reply. but the woods answered with a soft hiss, as if it were listening to them. The island wasn't large. It could be circled on foot in under 10 minutes. The trees thick but not dense enough for anyone to hide if chased. They split up, each heading in a different direction, beams of light sweeping the ground, every tree root, every rock. Jason felt something was off. If she were here, they should have seen her by now. Then suddenly, a scream, sharp, brief, cut off midway, like it had been choked out. "Over there!" Kyle yelled. They all rushed toward the sound. Jason barreled through the underbrush, bare feet slashed by thorns, warm blood seeping in the cold night. He arrived with Kyle and Jake. No one was there, but the water was rippling. A wide wake was spreading, as if a boat had just sped away. The faint hum of an engine receded into the darkness. No lights, no silhouette. Jake pointed at the water. "There's a wake. Someone just left." Jason cursed. "We were baited." He called 911. The signal was weak, but it connected. He reported quickly, describing the location and situation. 20 minutes later, the patrol boat's lights swept over the island. They listened to the group's account with grave seriousness, even sending out alerts to all nearby vessels. Nothing was found. No boat was detained. No missing persons were reported. That night, only their boat remained, drifting quietly off the island shore, and 6 people haunted by one question. What did they hear, and who or what had called them there? When the Bay Patrol boat's lights pulled away, leaving behind a darkness as thick as tar, the group stood frozen, no one wanting to be the first to speak. No one looked at each other. It felt like they were all clinging to the silence, hoping it would somehow explain the unexplainable. "There's no one on the island." Kyle repeated what he had said before, but this time his voice was quieter. "We searched thoroughly." Jason nodded. That tight, twisting feeling he'd felt when he heard the scream still hadn't left him. It didn't sound like a random noise. It was someone's last cry, or something's. They returned to the boat. Still, no one spoke. Their footsteps on the damp sand thudded like heavy blows against the ground. But then, as Kyle pulled up the anchor, Jason froze. Something just caught the edge of his vision. In the sand, right where they had come ashore, was an extra footprint. Strange, longer, deeper, as if the walker hadn't been barefoot but wore something heavy, misshapen, asymmetrical. And there was only one trail, no matching pair. Jason swallowed. "Kyle, did anyone else come onto the island?" "I didn't see anyone," Kyle replied, voice shaking. "We counted 6. No one got lost." Jason pointed to the footprint. Everyone turned back. A heavy silence fell over them. The footprint led into the woods. No one said a word. No one dared to follow it. Kyle turned, climbed aboard the boat quickly. The others followed. Jason was the last, but just before jumping up, he looked back. The night wind stirred gently, and the trees rustled like whispers. And then, for just a moment, he saw a figure, standing in the woods, not clearly male or female, not moving, no visible eyes, just standing there, watching. "Jason?" Kyle's voice called from the boat, tense with worry. Jason turned sharply, climbed aboard without a word. When he looked back again, the figure was gone. The boat cut through the water on its way back to the dock. No one laughed. No one mentioned the scream, the footprint, or the figure in the woods. It wasn't until they were sitting in Kyle's backyard, the yellow porch light casting a soft glow, that they began whispering, as if speaking too loud might call the darkness back. Jason looked at each of them. "If that was real," he said quietly, "then we were led there. She, or it, wanted us on the island." Jake looked at him, shivering. And if we hadn't come back in time? No one answered. The question lingered, like a cry still echoing across the bay, never to be answered. A week after that night, Jason still hadn't slept through a single night. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the scream. Not the initial one, but the scream that was cut off mid-sentence, as if someone had been silenced mid-cry. And the way that sound struck his chest, it couldn't be recreated and it couldn't be forgotten. The police found nothing. No unidentified boats were recorded in the area. No missing persons were reported. No evidence that anything had ever happened that night. They simply took the group's statements and filed it away as a false alarm. But Jason couldn't forget that footprint. He went back to the island twice, alone, during the day. No signs, no one. Just the same trees, standing silent as if they had never witnessed anything. Each time he went, he brought a knife, a flashlight, and his phone. But both times, when he stepped into the clearing where they had heard the scream, his phone lost all signal, no warning, not a single bar. On the third night after his return, Jason received an anonymous message. No number, no name. Just a single line of text. I saw you all. I wasn't alone. His blood ran cold. His hands trembled as he reached to call back. But the screen went black. The phone had suddenly powered off. After that, no one in the group ever mentioned that night again. No news. No explanations. Just a growing silence between their gatherings, as if they had all stepped through a door and realized that what lay on the other side was no longer the world they once understood. Jason began closing his curtains every night, not because he was afraid of someone looking in, but because he feared some eyes were looking out from within. On a moonless night in 1987, the ocean off the coast of Cape Cod was darker than the inside of a nailed-shut coffin. The wind was cold, the sea still, and the sky as if someone had forgotten to paint in the stars. Jack and Michael, two brothers as close as shadow and form, were men of the sea. For over a decade, they had piloted a 2-story, 30-plus-foot cabin cruiser, a beast of iron and rotting wood, into open waters, fishing for tuna, cod, or whatever else took the bait. That day, they were nearly 20 miles offshore. Calm waves, plenty of fish, a perfect day. After a simple dinner of dry bread and beer, they sat in the cabin playing cards, listening to the steady rhythm of waves slapping the hull, the sea's lullaby, until the lights cut out. Without warning, without a single alert, the entire electrical system died. No lights, no radio, no compass, only darkness, thick, heavy as burning plastic smoke, pouring into every corner of the boat. "It's the fuse," Jack muttered, groping for the control box in the dark. They had one old flashlight, its beam as weak as a wet match. Checking the panel, Jack found 2 main fuses blown, something nearly impossible unless someone had done it intentionally. But out here, in the middle of a peopleless ocean, who could that be? They decided not to risk turning back in the night. Both brothers locked the cabin doors and lay down, hoping daylight would bring answers. But as the night deepened, something else arrived. A sound, unclear whether wind or voice, echoed from the stern. A persistent rhythmic noise, like a moan, or a cry for help. Someone trapped in the void. Michael sat upright. "Did you hear that?" Jack nodded. Together they stepped onto the back deck, flashlight trembling in hand. They stared into the dense black, into the place where the ocean ends and something else begins. And the sound went on, as if tonight They were no longer alone. On the back deck, the sea wind howled in sharp gusts, carrying the scent of salt and something else, a metallic odor, thick and pungent like old blood. Jack aimed the flashlight toward the horizon. Nothing but darkness, yet that sound, the faint moaning, like the breath of someone dying, still echoed, bouncing back from an unseen void. Michael whispered, "Maybe it's waves." Echoing off a cliff? Jack didn't answer. He knew it wasn't the waves, it wasn't the wind. And if it were an animal, why was it so rhythmic, like drawn-out breathing? They went back into the cabin, but sleep never came. Every creak of the floorboards, every soft groan of the door, hinges became the breath of someone. Something crawling around the hull. By dawn, thick tendrils of fog had rolled in, heavy as milk. When the first light touched the surface of the sea, Jack was the first to wake. He pulled Michael out to the deck. "Look." Through the mist, a boat emerged, silent, drifting almost parallel to them. A smaller cabin boat, about 20 feet, white-painted but covered in algae and dry mud. No flag, no registration number, not a single sound. "Anyone there?" Michael shouted. No reply. They moved closer. Jack dropped anchor to keep some distance, then pulled out a handheld foghorn and gave a long blast. Silence. "You stay," Jack said, tying a rope between the two boats. He jumped onto the strange vessel, wobbling on the waves. The cabin door was unlocked. His hand pushed gently. The hinges groaned like a belated warning. The first thing that hit him was the stench of death. So strong, Jack immediately covered his nose. The smell of decay. The smell of something that used to be human. Inside the small cabin, the light barely reached the densest shadows. And there, hanging from a frayed rope, was the body of a man, eyes wide open, tongue protruding as if still trying to speak in his final moment. Jack stumbled back and vomited over the side. Michael didn't enter. He just stood frozen, watching his brother emerge with a look of horror he'd never seen before. No one spoke on the way back. Only after marking the coordinates and calling the Coast Guard did they finally dare to speak. In their minds, the moaning from the night still lingered, a cry from the dead, or from something that had witnessed that death. When authorities arrived, they pulled the body up, towed the boat away. No identification, no wallet, no papers. Only the rope and a single line written in pencil inside the cabin. "I didn't go alone." For days after they returned, Jack barely ate, barely slept. His eyes were sunken, his mind hazy like someone lost in a dream. Michael tried to pull him out of that state, but every question was met with a shake of the head and a distant gaze. "I still hear it," Jack finally said. "That moaning, it doesn't stop." Michael was about to dismiss it until he heard it too. That night, around 3 a.m., the same time they had heard the moaning at sea, strange sounds came from the cabin. At first, it was just the creak of the floorboards, like someone walking very slowly. Then came the knocking. 3 knocks, evenly spaced, like knuckles tapping on wood. Knock. Pause. Knock. Michael sat up, grabbed the flashlight. Nothing. No one. Jack stood at the cabin door as if he had been there all night. "I knew it would come back," Jack said softly, his eyes fixed on the window. "It's already on our boat." The next morning, Michael found the first sign. 3 handprints formed from salt and water on the glass of the back deck window. They belonged to neither of them. They were larger, longer, like those of someone who had been in the sea for far too long. Michael pressed him for answers, but Jack just repeated, "It doesn't want to die alone. It needs someone to replace it." That night, Jack disappeared. No note, no trace. The police later found their boat adrift in the bay, the anchor dropped amid the fog. On the cabin table, there was a water-stained note, "I'm going with it. Don't look for me." The police mounted a search for nearly a week. No results, no body, no leads. The ghost boat was later destroyed, but before it was burned, a forensic technician found something odd in the moldy logbook left behind in the cabin. A single line scrawled again and again, like by someone unraveling into madness. "I hear him. I hear him. He hasn't left." Michael still lives in Cape Cod. He never goes to sea again. But sometimes, on moonless nights, he hears knocking, 3 steady taps from the wooden walls of his home. Michael left the sea, but the sea never left him. He sold his truck, gave up fishing, and moved deep inland, to a place where the sound of waves couldn't reach. But even in calm weather, his old wooden house would sometimes creak, like the planks of a ship in the middle of the night. Every night Michael locked the windows, barred the front door with a steel rod, and drew the curtains tight. But none of that helped him sleep, because his fear didn't come from outside. It came from within. Once, as he was about to doze off on the sofa, he heard it. That ancient sound, echoing from the depths of his subconscious. 3 knocks, evenly spaced, like the heartbeat of something no longer alive. He jolted awake, drenched in sweat, heart pounding like a drum. But there was no one at the door, nothing but the dense night, and mist as thin as the skin of a chilled corpse. The next night, he heard the moan. Not the wind, not imagination, but a familiar sound, the one that had followed him from the middle of the ocean. One September night, Michael dreamed of Jack. His brother stood in a sea of fog, eyes wide open, hand waving slowly as if underwater. His mouth didn't move, but the words rang in Michael's mind as clear as church bells. "It's your turn." Michael woke up. The house was silent. On the window pane, there were 3 handprints. Faint, long, wet, exactly like before. He knew then, he no longer needed to go to sea to hear the call, because it had found its way inside. Florida, in the middle of summer. The sun scorched the surface of the private canal that led from their house to the bay. It was the place where both siblings, Alyssa and Jason, had grown up, surrounded by the scent of salt, the sound of waves, and countless afternoons riding the jet ski their dad had bought when they were still in high school. The house sat at the end of the canal, separated from neighbors by a stretch of marsh. The back door opened directly onto the dock. The canal cut through the neighborhood like a fine blade, splitting the world in 2, one side safe, the other unknown. That afternoon, they rode the jet ski out into the bay as usual. The sky was a perfect blue, the water unnervingly calm. After nearly an hour weaving between rocky outcrops, they stopped in the middle of the bay, sitting on the jet ski, drifting in the sea breeze. And then he appeared. A small boat drifted closer, old, with peeling paint and a wheezing engine. On the deck was a man in his 50s, balding, with a potbelly, holding a beer can. He smiled, the kind of smile that sent chills, not because it was friendly, but because it looked unused for far too long. "Nice jet ski," he said, eyes fixed on Alyssa. "Young girls like you should be careful. The water gets real deep." Jason nodded with a polite, tight-lipped smile. Alyssa turned her face away. But the man didn't leave. He asked where they lived, if they came out here often, and then, suddenly, "I've got a pool at my place, if you kids want to hang out." "No," Alyssa cut in, soft but firm. "We need to head back." They started the engine, leaving the man floating in the bay. But as they turned into the canal toward home, Jason glanced over his shoulder. That boat, it was still there, and it was turning, slowly, but following them. The jet ski sliced through the water gently as they returned. The canal leading home stretched like a narrow corridor between rows of waterfront houses, each one silent under the afternoon sun, as if holding its breath. Jason looked back again. The man's boat was still there. No lights, no roaring engine, just a quiet movement, ghost-like, slow, patient, following the exact path they had just traveled. "He might live here," Alyssa whispered, her eyes locked behind them. Her voice tried to stay calm, but Jason could hear the panic creeping into every word. They docked, tied up the jet ski. Both hurried to shut the sliding glass door, lock the gate, and close every curtain in the house. But less than 5 minutes later, from the living room, Jason saw it. The boat, drifting close to their dock. The man didn't step onto land, didn't speak, just sat there, beer can in hand, eyes fixed directly on their window. His stare wasn't just watching, it was claiming, as if the house had always belonged to him. Alyssa pulled Jason back inside. "Should we call the police?" she asked, hands trembling. "Call, now." But when they turned back, the boat was gone. No trace, no engine sound, as if it had never existed. That night, they didn't sleep. Jason kept watch by the door, eyes glued to the backyard that opened onto the canal. Alyssa double-checked every lock. Their dog, Maverick, lay beneath the kitchen table. But every time the wind stirred the curtains, he growled like he saw something invisible. And at exactly 2:43 a.m., Maverick sprang up and barked like mad. Jason rushed to the back door. No one. But the small gate leading to the dock was open. They didn't go outside, didn't dare. By morning, they found the footprints, wet, distinct, on the wooden deck. Just one set, leading up to the back door, then away. Alyssa burst into tears when Jason saw the scratches on the glass. 3 long, rough gouges, like fingernails dragged across wood. From that day forward, they never used the canal again. The jet ski was covered. The dock was abandoned. But each night, Jason still quietly sat by the window, staring out at the black water, waiting to see if the boat would return, because something told him it had never left. They had done everything, called the police, installed electronic locks, and put up privacy film to block views from outside. But that man, or rather his presence, never disappeared. A week passed, then 2. No more signs. Alyssa began convincing herself that maybe they had imagined too much. Jason said nothing. He just grew quieter and stayed awake through more and more nights. Until the 14th night. Strong winds. A sudden downpour around 11 p.m. Alyssa was in the shower and Jason stood in the kitchen, dim yellow light overhead, eyes fixed on the sliding glass door overlooking the canal. A slight movement made him freeze. The water, which had been torn apart by rain, now held a long trail, like a cut down the current. A boat, no lights, no sound, drifted through the rain, silent as a curse. Jason shouted, "Alyssa!" She rushed out, a towel wrapped around her. "What?" He didn't answer. His eyes didn't move from the glass. His hand rose, pointing at the dock. The boat was pulling in. The man was still there, but this time, he stood up. Not hurried, not afraid, just stood, and stepped onto the dock as if he'd always belonged there. Jason grabbed the kitchen knife. Alyssa backed away, trembling. Maverick barked like mad, growling and leaping at the glass door. Footsteps echoed on the wooden deck outside. Then, the knocking. 3 knocks. Clear. On the glass. "Come out," the man's voice rang, calm, steady, as if inviting someone for a walk. "Come out, or I'll come in." Jason stepped back, his phone slipping from his hand. No signal. Alyssa grabbed his hand. "Do something." Then the glass warped, not shattered, but as if something was pressing from the outside, bulging inward. Each subsequent scratch sounded like fingernails clawing inside their skulls. Jason lunged forward and yanked the security door shut. No one outside, no boat, no man. Only rainwater, wet footprints, and 3 deep gouges on the glass. As if someone, or something, had once stood there, touching the final barrier between them and a night with no way back. The next morning, the sky was eerily clear. No trace of the previous night's rain, no puddles, no fallen leaves. Everything was unnaturally clean, except for the sliding glass door. The 3 claw marks were still there, deep, sharp, and cold to the touch. Jason tried to wipe them off, used a glass scraper, even acetone. Nothing worked. They weren't etched on the surface, but within the glass itself. The police came, took a report, but did nothing beyond drafting a soulless summary. No forced entry, no significant damage, no clear evidence. "Do you have cameras?" one officer asked. Jason and Alyssa looked at each other. Both shook their heads. They had thought they wouldn't need any. That night, Alyssa packed a bag and stayed at a friend's house. Jason remained. He said he needed to understand this, but really, he just wanted to be alone with the one question no one dared to ask out loud. Why had he chosen their home? The night was quiet. No rain, no wind, but exactly at 2:43 a.m., Maverick let out a long howl, the kind only a dog gives when it senses something beyond instinct. Jason bolted upright. No boat, no one at the door, but beneath the doormat was a wet footprint, fresh, distinct, not from outside coming in, but from inside, going out. Jason stood frozen, because at that moment he realized the threat was no longer outside. It had already gotten in, and maybe it had never left. And if it was somewhere inside the walls, under the dock, or beneath the floorboards, the next time, it might not stop at just leaving scratches. Three stories, 3 journeys that seemed like just another fun trip. But then the sea became too quiet, the fog is too thick, and the darkness too clever to be a coincidence. When you leave solid ground, you lose the one thing that anchors you to reality, the sense that you can run on a boat in the middle of the ocean, in a private canal, or out in the open sea. If something shows up, you have nowhere to hide, no one to call, only deep water and silence. So much silence. If today's story sent a chill down your spine, made you glance back at your old boat, or made you hesitate before heading out tonight, you're not alone. Leave a comment below. Tell us about your own experience, or share which part of the video gave you the creepiest feeling. Every comment is a small light in the dark, and we read them all. And don't forget to hit like if your heart beat a little faster at any point. It helps us know you're here and listening.